Sports.
Hey there, sports fans. Welcome to Sportsball, part of the SPDM Crew podcast. We talk about sports-related topics, but we focus on you, the fan, and what you like, whether it is a sport, team, event, athlete, or sports-related news topic. This week, we are talking about all things Tennessee. So we're talking specifically about Tennessee football, but we'll throw in some basketball, we'll throw in some baseball as well, because Tennessee recently has had a string of a lot of really good success, both in the men's and women's sports arena when it comes to college athletics. And to talk about this, I have a fellow Sif Pop writer and I would call, yeah, the commissioner of all of our fantasy sports leagues. We have JCD here. JCD, how's it going?
It's going good. I don't know if I would say commissioner of everything, probably just football in terms of fantasy sports leagues, but no, I did get that started. So
Robert, I guess Robert technically would be the commissioner for the
he'd be the one for
basketball.
a baseball or basketball. Aaron would be the one for hockey.
There's a fantasy. We do fantasy hockey now. Since when?
I think I was part of it briefly for a year, didn't understand it at all, and then just didn't join it again. So
Yeah, fantasy hockey kind of freaks me out. So I'm not sure I would do that. I joined fantasy baseball last year, and it's excruciating at times because
mhm.
for me, baseball is not really a sport that I follow all too often, but it also required a lot more upkeep than I was anticipating, but I still had fun. I came in second place. It irks me to no end that I lost to Nash, but that's okay. No
That
big
happened
deal.
to me the first time I we did fantasy baseball league. I ended up finishing second. Funny enough, I'm pretty sure I lost to Nash in the finals. And the entire season, Rob just could not beat me that year. And every single time we played, as soon as we got done, I would tweet at him a gift from Parks and Recreation of Chris Pratt's character going, "I have no idea what I'm doing. I just know I'm doing a really good job."
Oh, that's fantastic, and I'm sure he just loved that.
Yeah, he's gotten revenge on me since. So
Well, yeah, that sounds about right.
yeah.
All right. So we are talking about all things Tennessee, and you are a big Tennessee fan.
Oh
So
yeah.
I figured I would come and ask you to be on. And I guess let's start at the beginning. How did you become a fan of all things Tennessee sports? Because apparently, according to you, now I can't verify this, you have Tennessee memorabilia around you, but I can't see you, so I
Yeah.
can't verify
My
that. So if you send me a picture, maybe I'll believe it. But
Yeah, I'll
according
have to
to
send you
you,
some pictures later, Mike. But over not too far from me, I have a framed newspaper from the College Baseball World Series this past year. I actually have two frames of that. Above me, I have a framed ticket and I want to call it a brochure. I can't remember the exact term for it, but from the Battle at Bristol
oh,
between
okay.
Tennessee and Virginia Tech. Got a signed picture of John Ward as well. Got quite a few different Tennessee memorabilia things just hanging around, including obviously outerwear. So
Nice. All right. So, well, let's just start at the beginning then. So, what did you go to Tennessee? Are you from the area? What is it about Tennessee kind of that drew you in and ultimately landed you as a fan?
well, I would have to say my mom's definitely the biggest reason why I'm a Tennessee fan. Because when I was growing up, there were more than a few times that we would be watching a Tennessee game on TV. And those are some of my earliest sports related memories, just watching like Casey Clausen, Tennessee quarterback in the early 2000s. He was the first quarterback whose name I could just remember off the top of my head. Just watching him, and then like his brother Rick Clausen ended up playing, and then the end of the Fulmer era going into Lane Kiffin for a year, and then to Dooley and all that. Yeah, she was the one that got me interested in it, which I like to say that my my dad would be sitting there next to her. My mom's screaming at the TV for the guy to run with the ball. My dad's just sitting there quietly hoping that Tennessee wins, or else she's going to be mad for the rest of the night. But no, I was a lot of times just watching Tennessee games with her, especially Tennessee football and Tennessee basketball. And ever since I kind of started watching those games, I did decide I really wanted to go to the University of Tennessee. Granted, I was not athletically gifted, so I was never going to play for one of the teams, but it was
Mhm.
always fun to watch from the stands. Although, at least when I was in school, we didn't have too many games that I was really big on enjoying, to be honest.
Okay.
Because like I said, went to UT. My first year was the last year, if I recall correctly, of Dooley being in the position of head coach for football. And then we hired Butch Jones during that time. And I remember thinking Butch might be pretty good as I finished my degree. That's as didn't end up going that way,
Mm,
unfortunately.
yeah.
So, but also, I think our basketball team at the same time wasn't doing too good. And I think I'm gonna have to Google it to be sure, but that there was a little bit after Pat Summitt had stepped down as head coach of the women's basketball team. So, like when I went to the University of Tennessee, it was when a lot of our big teams started having a bit of a lull in their sports.
Mm.
So,
And that's always a bit of a bummer
yeah,
when something like that happens. And with Pat's with God, what's her name again? Pat's
Pat Summitt.
yeah, because I was like Pat Summerall. No, that's a football guy. Pat
No,
Summit, she's a legend
yeah,
and not just in women's college basketball coaching circles. It's just basketball circles in general. So she's just an icon, and it's really sad how she stepped down as well, because not it wasn't exactly her choice either.
no, it
So
wasn't because. And I'm looking at it right now in 2012, she retired, and it's because she got diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
yeah.
And we unfortunately, she's since passed away. And just the fact that's the reason why she had to leave was extremely depressing and probably extremely painful for the Tennessee fan base too. So I mean, there's a reason why the basketball court inside I still call it Thompson Bowling, although I call it Food City Center now. There's a reason why the basketball court is called the Summit, because she built the women's basketball program up to a level that very few other women's basketball teams could ever get to.
Yeah, for sure. And currently, right now, Tennessee has kind of been on a bit of a hot streak when it comes to basketball. They're, did I read that right? They're number one in the country right now for
In men's
basketball.
basketball, yes. And as we record this, we just played Arkansas, which they just had Arkansas had a basketball player transfer to them from Tennessee named Jonas Adu, who had his quote unquote homecoming to return to Tennessee. And John Calipari also went to Arkansas to be their head coach. And he and Rick Barnes, since they've coached against each other, I think now it's Rick Barnes has 12 wins, Calipari's 10.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah, as we recorded this, we did beat Arkansas pretty soundly at that. So and in women's basketball, we're undefeated at least as we record this. I don't know how the next game is going to shake down because I think I don't remember who we play off the top of my head, but I know they're a fairly highly ranked team, so it's going to be quite the test.
Well, enjoying some of the great moments and great highlights that has been Tennessee sports lately. But before we get to some of that stuff, I want to get some memories that you have of watching Tennessee athletics, whether it is football, basketball, baseball, anything when it comes to Tennessee athletics. Any favorite games or moments or players that kind of stand out to you as people that you enjoyed watching either growing up or when you were at Tennessee?
Yeah. At Tennessee, I would have to say it probably my time at Tennessee as a student, for sure in football, would have to be Josh Dobbs and Jawan Jennings, because they were still very early in their careers when I was still in school there. But I really enjoyed it, especially because it was one of those things where we had Nathan Peterman on the roster. Justin Worley was our starting quarterback, but our offensive line didn't matter how good Justin Worley was going to be. We didn't have an offensive line that could protect him. And I remember sitting there thinking, Peterman's probably good, but we need a guy with legs and we need to get Dobbs in there. And in a way, I kind of got vindicated because we put Peterman in, he didn't do too good. And then Josh Dobbs ended up coming in. And even though he didn't necessarily have an immediate turnaround, it became pretty clear that Dobbs was the guy. It's kind of like how in 2022 we had Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker had transferred in. And Milton didn't look great, to be completely honest. He looked better in his senior year after Hendon Hooker graduated. But I guess actually, no, it's 2021 Hendon Hooker's first started taking over. And he ended up really kind of showing that he had something that Joe Milton at least didn't at the time. And was one of those like this guy's clearly the guy. We need to put him in. And God of 2022 was not just one of those like what in the world just happened kind of moments because like I talked about going through college, Tennessee wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best we did in my immediate like time entering and right after college, the best we did was 8-4, which to be fair, having to see some of the things that we had seen, 8-4 was not bad, but it was also one of those things where we started wondering when are we going to take that next step. And in 2022, seeing us go 10-2, it was, and also knocking out Alabama for the first time in a decade and a half was something cathartic, I would say. Which is funny because I see all these Alabama fans after we rushed the field during that game. I wasn't at the game, unfortunately. I was watching it on TV, but seeing the fans rush the field and seeing the Alabama fans talking about how they never had the mood to rush the field. I was like, hey, let us beat you 15 years in a row, and then you finally beat us after the 15th year at home. You're going to feel a little catharsis there that no one's going to care that you rushed the field at that point.
Right.
But some of my earlier sports memories, like I said, I think I talked to you beforehand. I finally figured out which team it was, but in 2002, I went with my parents and my brother to the Tennessee-Arkansas game in Neyland Stadium. And we did not know that at the time that game was going to go to 6 overtime. And there was more than one moment during overtime where it looked like Tennessee was about to lose because like something would happen. We would turn the ball over. We missed the kick. I don't remember exactly all the things that happened, but then we'd be getting ready to leave. And then all of a sudden, Arkansas would be lining up for the go-ahead win. And then their kicker would get blocked. So all of a sudden we had to hurry back to our seats to be able to watch the rest of the game. It didn't finish until well after midnight, but no, that was a case. That was a game, if I remember right, ended when Jason Witten caught a game-winning touchdown in the end, which he ended up going on to have a spectacular career as tight end with the Cowboys. So, but yeah, no, that was probably one of my favorite memories as a kid, just going to that 6 overtime game because it didn't realize games could go that long.
Well, yeah, it's taken me a little while to figure out the college sport or college football specifically overtime rules because the NFL ones were a little murky at best, but I at least figured out it's like, hey, there's only a finite amount of time and the game can't end in a tie. And it doesn't seem like that's the case in college sports. It's just keep going back and forth until something happens where you can crown a winner somehow. Which
I just had to Google it. We didn't have overtime in college football until 1995. Of course, at the time I was 2, so I didn't remember exactly that college football didn't have overtime at some point. So yeah, no, Tennessee has in its history plenty of ties.
Okay.
Which I mostly remember it just from watching replays of it. But it's also one of my favorite calls from John Ward, who is, as I said, I have a pretty picture of him. He was the voice of the Vols for years. And I still remember there being natural gas commercials that he would be the narrator of.
Nice.
So, and I met him. I don't remember meeting him, but I didn't meet him. Like I said, I got a signed picture of him on my wall. So
very nice.
But
that's awesome.
Yeah, in '98, Tennessee played Florida, and that was the year we ended up going to the national championship. And it was the first overtime game Tennessee and Florida ever had, or at least as far as I know, Florida ever had. And I still remember the call of John Ward when Florida missed the field goal and Tennessee won the game, where he just shouted, "Pandemonium reigns."
Nice.
So there's a lot of fond memories from those early days. So also a lot of painful memories. The period between Lane Kiffin being hired and Jeremy Pruitt being fired for cause were not good years for football. And it's like one of those things, like you think, oh, finally I'm seeing a glimmer of hope and future, but you realize that light at the end of the tunnel you see is just a train going the other way. So, but I know you want to talk about at some point the state of the program.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Yeah. Do you have any memories from basketball or baseball or anything else Tennessee athletics that you followed? Were you randomly a big, like, I don't know, water polo fan or anything like that? Or was
I don't think Tennessee has water polo, fortunately. I do remember when I was in college going to a Lady Vols volleyball game.
Oh, nice.
Okay. I haven't kept up too much with volleyball because it's one of those things where after you get out of the 2 big ones with college football and college basketball, I can feel my interest waning a little bit. At college baseball, I really got into it obviously when we got a Tony Vitello as our head coach for the baseball team. And this is probably the most recent good memory for baseball. But like I said, I got the framed College World Series newspaper in my house. I actually had a chance to go to that game. So all 3 games of the finals. And I still have no idea how Hunter Ensley did not get tagged in game 3. How he juked out of that tag is still a sight to behold. And basketball, there was a couple of times, because I grew up in Tennessee. My family and I would all go to the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville to watch. It would always be like a double header, and Tennessee would be one of the 2 double headers.
Nice.
I think like MTSU would be one of them sometimes, or Memphis would be one of them, but it'd always be a double header, and Tennessee was one of the 2 double headers. So got to go to a few of those games to watch, and those were really fun to watch too. And talked about Calipari being the coach at Arkansas, but he was a coach at Memphis. I remember watching on TV, Tennessee was ranked number 2. Memphis was ranked number 1, and it being essentially a fight to the finish on who was going to be the number 1 team the next week. And then we up and lost after we beat Memphis and got number 1. We up and lost the very next week, which is usually it feels like our luck.
Of course, that's how stuff like that works, right?
Yeah, luckily we didn't repeat that a couple of years later. I don't remember who we jumped to get to number 1, but I know Grant Williams and Admiral Schofield were on the men's team at the time, and we were playing at Vanderbilt. We had just became the number 1 team in the nation, and Vanderbilt took us to task. But at the same time, Grant Williams pretty much picked up the Tennessee basketball team, put them on his back, and said, "We are not losing this game."
Right.
And I think by the end of regulation, he had like 50 points.
Jesus.
On his own. And that he was basically the reason that it did not end with a Tennessee loss. But no, it's been some fun things to see and watch in person. I wish I could go to more basketball games and stuff like that. Frank, actually, now that I've moved back to Tennessee, I might need to see about getting some tickets both for the men's and the women's, especially because if the momentum continues the way it has been, because especially I think in a few weeks, the Vols play at Auburn for men's basketball, and if whoever wins that game is going to be number 1.
Oh yeah, for March Madness, that's definitely going to have a lot of implications, which is great to see when your team has stakes coming up later on in college basketball, because that's always fun when that happens. I went to Eastern Illinois University, which they suck at most of their athletics, and the only thing that we're known for is producing Tony Romo, Jimmy Garoppolo, and a bunch of football coaches. That's really about it. So I've always envied individuals who their college teams, they have something to play for, whether it's this newly minted expanded college playoff or March Madness, anything, because I never got to experience anything like that. We got close on the women's side once, but never anything on the men's side. So you mentioned that you're looking to get some tickets. Let's kind of move on to the current state of the team. So, well, which one do you want to start with? Because it would make sense to start with Tennessee since their season just ended for football, but basketball right now they're playing, they're doing really well. And then there's baseball, which you mentioned before. So which one do you want to start with?
Let's go ahead and start with football, since that's the one that just wrapped up. And here in a couple of weeks, it's going to wrap up completely, both FCS football and also FBS football, with the college football playoff coming to an end.
All right. So Tennessee, they did pretty well. They got into the playoff this year. They ended the season overall 10-3, lost in the initial round of the playoff to Ohio State, who they're just truck stopping everyone right now. So there's a little bit of, at least, I don't know, catharsis maybe. You mentioned that before, that, hey, at least they're destroying everybody. It's not like they're just destroying Tennessee. So general thoughts, I guess, with how do you view this football season, and are you excited for what the future holds for Tennessee football?
If you had asked me about 48 hours ago, I would have probably told you concern, mostly because of the transfer portal. But that's mostly because of the fact that news broke last week at one point that Mike Matthews, a 5-star receiver we had recruited for before the 2024 year, had requested transfer papers. But I found out yesterday at some point that he actually never put his, either he withdrew his name or never submitted the documentation to go into the transfer portal. So it seems like he's going to return. So yeah, as of right now, I would say optimistic, but cautious optimism. Because I mean, as I said, I've went through the Dooley years, I went through the Jones years, I went through the Pruitt years, and honestly, if you told me 4 years after we got rid of Pruitt and became a laughing stock of college sports for the whole McDonald's baggage joke, that we would have 10-2 seasons in 4 years and would have made the college football playoff in Josh Heupel's 4th year, I would have looked at you like you had lost your damn mind. So like I said, there's a level of cautious optimism because on the one hand, the fact that Heupel has had this level of success is downright amazing. And it very much just makes me glad that the guy that I thought we might just want to take a chance on him, we don't know for sure what's going to happen with this team going forward. We need to just have someone who can stabilize the ship. And not only has he righted the ship, but he has turned it into a fairly dynamic powerhouse in a way, at least compared to where we were.
Right.
It feels really good right now where we are. So I feel cautiously optimistic. Well, I do have some concerns with the direction of, frankly, football in general for college football, but also the team. But I feel like those are two different kind of concerns, and they both need to be addressed separately in their own ways.
Okay. So, well, why don't we address them now then? So,
yeah.
So let's kind of just start college football in general. So you talk about some concerns.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what are some of those concerns, and why don't we start with that?
Well, part of the concerns are there are some things that I don't feel like I'll be able to ever see the change that needs to happen, or I feel like needs to happen, or I may just be the old man yelling at the cloud. But stuff like
which there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
that's fair. It's just one of those things where, like the 2-minute timeout, the idea of the clock doesn't automatically stop on a first down unless you're inside the 2-minute timeout. The clock not stopping when you go out of bounds, or maybe it does stop, but it only stops until they spot the ball. I don't remember for sure exactly what that rule is, but some of the ways they're trying to make it more like the pro game, or at least feels like they're trying to. Or at the same time, they may be looking at people going, okay, they're complaining about the fact that these games are going on for too long. Let's shorten the game by making the clock run faster, or run more.
Right.
As opposed to the fact that it's the commercials. We don't need to have 2 minutes of play and then 5 minutes of commercials before we get to 2 more minutes of play.
But money. It's all about money.
It is all about money, but that does not necessarily mean that money is a good thing.
Oh no, I totally agree with that, because the current state of college athletics right now is a bit of a mess, isn't it? Because
and that's the other thing I was going to be talking about, because you have the NIL, you have the transfer portal. Both of those are something that I feel like, in theory, are a very good idea. Because I've long been a proponent that these guys are representing the University of Tennessee, or they could be representing Eastern Illinois University. They were for the longest time not getting paid being this representative, putting their bodies quite literally on the line of scrimmage for their universities.
Right.
They deserve to get some kind of compensation other than just the whole, well, you're going to get your degree.
Well, that's not even a guarantee for some people. And
some of them are just there to go pro.
Right. Well, and the other thing, the other argument that you hear for that is, well, they get free room, free board, all of that stuff. But even that is just like a small percentage of what somebody could possibly make if they did get paid what they're actually worth to the university as well.
Exactly. It's just, I do think the direction NIL has gone is a bit of a problem.
It's a bit of a problem. It is severely not
Yeah.
regulated. It is
I'm about to say I'm
literally the
definitely
Wild West.
understating the issue there. What I'm
Yeah.
saying, it's a bit of a problem because,
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, it's unregulated.
It-
You have it where a guy decides, well, I'm not getting the playing time I want. I'm going to transfer out, and I mean that happens. That's going to be not that big of a deal. But there also may be people who are just going, I want to transfer because of the fact that I know if I transfer from Slippery Rock to the University of Alabama, those Alabama boosters are going to put money into the NIL fund. So that way I can make a few million as opposed to here where I only make a few thousand.
right.
And it's like, it feels like it's almost an overcorrection to the
Oh,
problem of those players not getting paid.
yeah. Yeah. I would wholeheartedly agree with that because it just feels like people are just mercenaries for hire now. And
Mm-hmm.
granted, who are we kidding that people have been getting paid under the table for a long time in
Oh,
college
yeah, for
college
sure.
athletics, and only like a handful of people have gotten caught for it. But
Mm-hmm.
it was just a well-known issue within the sport. And you're right. I think the NCAA, who I think the NCAA is just now just afraid to act because they know that they can't do anything and they just can't make anyone happy. So they're just like,
Mm-hmm.
we're just gonna deregulate everything, and then we're just gonna stick our head in the sand even further
Yeah.
than we had it before.
Pandora's box has been open on the issue, and it's going to be a pain to try to close it.
Right, right. And I think you mentioned it before. There is no easy solution to
Mm-hmm.
this. Is that what are you going to do? You're going to install a instill a salary cap within college, the NIL funds. Are you Are you going to have like specific tiers of players who can get slightly more because they're more popular or they're quote unquote better? How do you do that? Like you
Yeah.
can't. It's too hard to regulate at this point. So there's been talk about the potential for privatizing everything with college athletics. I'm not sure how that can go either, but I don't know. There are issues at play. But which one do you think is a bigger issue right now, the NIL or the transfer portal?
I would say the NIL for sure because the transfer portal, I think the transfer portal is a good idea fundamentally because the fact that it's one of those things where you have those players, they might not be getting the starting time they want, or they may not feel like they're getting the fair shake. Like I use Nathan Peterman for an example because I talked to him before. He would have benefited immensely from the transfer portal when he was at Tennessee, even because when he transferred out, he ended up going to Pitt. Having a transfer portal there would have been a pretty good thing for him because that would give him an idea of what teams are interested in him, what teams that recruited him still might want him as a player. So I think the transfer portal fundamentally is a good thing. It's just one of those things that with the NIL on top of it, it's just almost a festering wound
Right,
with an
right.
additional problem on top of it.
So two other things in college athletics that I did want to ask you about because we're just talking about college athletics and specifically college football right now
Mm-hmm.
because it is a moneymaker for sure. The playoffs. How are
Mm-hmm.
you feeling about the current state of the playoffs right now? With the this year knowing full well that expansion helped Tennessee get in, or well, I wouldn't go that far, but expansion, we're what 12 teams now for
Mm-hmm.
the playoffs. Originally it was four. That was an expansion from just the regular BCS championship, which was just like we'll just pick the two best teams, quote unquote,
Yeah.
even though best is always an arbitrary thing,
Oh,
especially.
absolutely. Because I think
So,
Auburn got left out one year under the BSCS system, despite being like 12-0 or 13-0.
yeah,
Boise State always having the argument of why don't you give us a shot at this, especially like after they beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl that one year,
right.
because it felt like you said it felt arbitrary. It felt like they were just picking the top two teams from the power conferences, and just because the fact that you play a weaker conference does that mean you're any less entitled for a shot at the national championship? So I feel like the playoff frankly it's something that's a little bit long overdue for the FBS level of college football because I know the FCS level and Division 2 and 3 have their playoff systems.
Uh-huh.
So I think it's a little bit overdue for the FBS level. I think that they're going to find a probably more perfect solution than what's there currently I would say yes, and I think that's going to be the seeding, honestly, when it comes to that, because I don't hate the idea that Boise State and Arizona State got the bye that they got for winning their conferences, but I feel like people do also have a good point that they were ranked lower than some of the other teams, that maybe we should consider doing the seeding based off of ranking entirely, but just give the conference champions a automatic bid into the playoff.
Mhm.
Just don't give them an automatic bye for the top 5 ranked conference champions.
Right.
So
And
it's one of those, I could see that being the argument.
well, because that's the other thing as well, is that conference realignment, it's still coming up a
Mhm.
lot. And I live in Illinois, where the Big Ten is more like the Big 22, and it expands
Yeah.
like all throughout the country now,
It's,
which
it's the big 18 now, to be honest.
yeah,
Which, God, talking about realignment, the Big 12 was on life support for how many years?
yeah,
And then all of
yeah.
a sudden, here's a Pac-12 just exploding into billions of pieces.
Right. Yeah, that's a little sad that the Pac-12 kind of just ended the way that they did when
Mhm.
the Big 12, if there was a target for a conference that you thought was going to explode, it was the Big 12, but
Yeah, it was the
they
Big 12, and some of the I figured some of those schools like Texas Tech would go to the Pac-12. Some of them would probably come to the SEC, like Texas and Oklahoma ultimately did, and then a few others would probably end up going to the Big Ten or the ACC, while the rest of the really small schools ended up going to some of the smaller conferences. But then, like you said, here's the Pac-12 suddenly just flying to pieces, mostly because the television deal got torpedoed, is the way I understand it, and it eventually essentially convinced the bigger schools to go to the other conferences and leave for Oregon State and Washington State essentially left out to dry.
pretty much, yeah. So, well, what do you think kind of the path forward for realignment is? Do you see a scenario where there's just like five major conferences and that's it? Or do you see some value in having some of these smaller conferences and knowing full well that this is we're not doing this based on like any scientific or hard facts or anything like that. This is just you as a fan.
Yeah.
What would you like to see in terms of alignment for college football?
Well, let me start out with what I would not want to see, and that would be the rumblings of the idea of the Super League
Yeah.
that some people have talked about, like the idea of the SEC and Big 12, not Big 12, Big 10 breaking off to form their own own individual level of college football separate from the FBS or NCAA. That's what I don't want to see, because the fact that I feel like at that point you would essentially be killing off the conferences and college athletics as we understand it. And I don't think anybody, aside from the people who are raking in the money, want to see that. But I kind of want to see, I would like to see, in a way, I almost want to say, I want to see like something I've always wanted to do in college football 25, and just do the nature, as I call it, the nature is healing a play of college football 25, where it's like, okay, I'm going to put these teams back at the conferences they're supposed to be in. So it's like rebuild the
Oh,
Pac 12. The Big 12 goes back to the way it once was. And everyone's back in the kind of almost their natural conference, I guess would be the way to put it. Although that would be a little bit harder to tell for some teams than others. But
sure.
I
But
just feel like the idea of us getting to the 17, 18 team conferences, they're starting to get bloated, especially with football. And we're eventually going to get to a crossroad where we're going to have to either reassess what the conferences look like, or just accept that college football as we know it is going to cease to exist, and it's going to become some insane super league under the NFL. Because I mean, especially like those mid-major conferences like the MAC, Conference USA, American Athletic Conference, Mountain West. I would hate to see them essentially be left holding the bag. So that way
right.
the Big 12, the ACC, the SEC, Big 10 can go chase the money. So that way, I don't know exactly what they would be wanting
Well,
to do with that, but
well, the how a lot of those teams make their money is that they are cannon fodder for
yeah,
a lot of these more successful, and try not to sound insensitive, but let's just call a spade, just like a better
yeah,
program in terms of just the skill level and the talent. Uh, can't deny that you occasionally get those that Appalachia State beating Michigan and just different things like that. You occasionally get stuff.
Everyone likes to go David versus Goliath story.
Oh yeah, for sure. But the vast majority of the time, it's the other way around, where these smaller conference teams trot into this hostile territory and just get absolutely waxed by these larger programs.
Yep.
And that's, I don't know, to me that's not okay either, but I get why they do it, because it's good exposure and they probably make a shitload of money off of it.
Oh yeah, they absolutely do. I mean, Kent State didn't come play Tennessee in Knoxville to try to win that game. They came there to get a paycheck.
Right.
Which is all, I mean, like I said, I like the idea of the David versus Goliaths occasionally happening. Like you mentioned, Appalachian State against Michigan. One of my favorites from recent memory was North Dakota State, if I recall correctly, beating Iowa.
Yeah.
But to be fair, though, Iowa is one of those teams that, historically speaking, if you can score more than 20 points, they're going to have a hard time beating you.
Yeah, you should be good to go.
Yeah.
So suffice to say that both you and I agree that college athletics in general is kind of at a bit of a weird crossroads, and we're still just waiting to see what's going to happen. So, but you mentioned Tennessee as well, that there's things specifically for them. So what are some concerns that you specifically have about Tennessee?
One thing I'm a bit concerned about with Tennessee right now first thing would be the transfer portal, mostly because of the fact that, like I said, in general, I think it's a good thing that these players have a way to be able to be like, hey, I'm looking for a fresh start, and other teams can come in and be like, okay, here's what we can offer you. But right now, Tennessee has, so far, everyone that's gone into the transfer portal from Tennessee are people who, like Squirrel White, for example. I'm going to hate to see him go, but at the same time, he's not one of those key pieces that I look at and just go, that one stings. So the fact that we only have one guy coming in currently out of the transfer portal, last I checked, that's a bit of a concern. I mean, I'm sure we'll be fine because we have a pretty decent recruiting class coming in this year. So especially because we got David Sanders Jr., and he's going to be a solid anchor on the offensive line. I am sure of it. But you have those guys, like the fact that we haven't really gotten anybody in from the transfer portal, we had all these guys go out, makes me a little bit concerned. And the other thing is, and I'm sure it's something you'll see anybody who's on Ball Twitter or something like that will talk about, and that is, in 2022, our offense was absolutely insane when it came to scoring. Like the fact that we ended up having a game go 52-49 against Alabama was beyond insane for me. I'm pretty sure that game took a few years off my life, but it was absolutely insane that ended up being such a high scoring game. But now, this year, we ended up 10-2. It turned out to be for a somewhat more stingy defense, although against a few teams like Georgia and against Ohio State, that defense got exposed. But the fact that our offense feels like it's stagnated a little bit since Hendon Hooker graduated,
okay,
it's a little bit of a concern. Now, admittedly, Nico Iamaleava, which I'm pretty sure I pronounced that right, he'll be fine. I mean, he's a redshirt freshman. He's got a few years to develop. He'll be fine. But we need to make sure that we come up with plays on the offense and get things together on the offensive side of the ball for him to succeed, which means that we need to make sure we have our wide receivers getting open and creating the separation we saw in 2022. It would be nice also we have another Dylan Sampson level year next year, which Dylan Sampson is going to the NFL, which I can't blame him. I think Peyton Lewis is going to be a phenomenal running back in his stead. But if we could get an offense that can be both terrifying to see when they throw the ball, but also terrifying to see when they run the ball, we're suddenly going to become a force to be reckoned with inside of the SEC. It's just whether or not we're going to be able to do that, I'm a little concerned about. And also, it's one of those things where we've dropped away games that I don't really feel like we should have dropped.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like 2023 at Alabama, we were up 27-7 at halftime, and then we ended up losing that game. We took the foot off the gas in that game somehow, or something happened where the momentum got away from us. This past year at Arkansas, the fact that our offense just looked like it was left on the bus at Arkansas, those are just some of the games that it feels like they got away from us. Like our offense just didn't show up for it. Like Georgia this year, I don't think there's any way we were going to beat Georgia. But if we can find a way to actually start winning a lot more of those true road games, kind of like we did when we went to LSU and basically walked them out of their own stadium, then I'll feel a lot more comfortable. But it's going to be one of those things where I feel like we're going to have to get just a little bit more creative on the offense, and on the defense, we're going to have to continue becoming a lot more stingy because we can't have those moments where our offense is struggling and our defense just can't keep us in the game because the offense can't do anything.
Yeah. Well, good thoughts on that, and hopefully Tennessee will find a path forward, because you mentioned the transfer portal, and you see that there are some teams that are just struggling to adapt to
Yeah.
not only the transfer portal and NIL. I'm looking at a team like Clemson, for example. Clemson,
Historically, Clemson and the transfer portal are like water and oil.
yeah. So, and Dabo Sweeney he's always been a big proponent. It's like, I don't understand why college athletes need to be paid, which again, not the best mentality to have in a situation like that, but hey, it is what it is, and we'll kind of see what happens. But the SEC it's not like it's a conference in sports that it's not like the conference as a whole has a down year or anything like that, particularly in football. There's always going to be a lot of powerhouses within the SEC. So got to find some ways to keep up. And I kind of think that's part of a reason why Nick Saban was like, you know what, I think I've done all that I could now. And I'm taking a look at the landscape right now, and I think I'm all set. So
yeah, he's made his money.
He's made his money. He's reached what's beyond legendary status. You're just like an icon. You're just one of a kind at this point, which and it seems like he's having a blast just doing what he's doing now, where he doesn't have to stress out about all of the stuff when it comes to just the glory of what Alabama football kind of just brings to the table, which like, I don't understand how what Bill Belichick is going to do differently for North Carolina football. Like, I don't
understand that either. I think North Carolina just needed a name and a face, and frankly, a warm body in the head coaching seat for now.
Yeah, and I don't understand how Belichick goes from the Patriots, and sure, did he get a little pantsed a little bit by Tom Brady winning a Super Bowl without him? Like a little bit, but at the same time, he's still one of the greatest NFL coaches of all time, and I can't see him going to a recruit and trying to massage him to get to the point where it's like, yeah, I'll sign with you. I don't see him going and doing that. So I don't understand that hire at all. But who knows? Maybe Bill Belichick is going to be one of the greatest college coaches ever. Maybe I don't know. We'll just have to.
We're going to find out, and it's going to be interesting to see. I think I remember hearing. I don't know if it actually got included in his contract, but I think I remember hearing something about how Steve was supposed to be and Steve Belichick, his son, was supposed to be the next one in line to be the UNC head coach. Which I like the idea of having a succession plan in place, because I'm pretty sure, if I recall right, funny enough, Ball for Life, Gerard Mayo, and former Patriots player, was essentially the heir apparent to Belichick when he left for the coach for the Patriots.
Okay.
And he's in his first year, if I recall right, and it's not been going great.
No, but
then again,
rough season.
Where the Patriots are right now, it was not going to go great.
Yeah, and as long as there's an understanding that, hey, there needs to be a bit of an adjustment period, and Gerard Mayo is first-time head coach, you got to give him a little bit of time to develop. Yeah. And as long as the Patriots do that, which they did that with Belichick, because his first couple seasons in New England were fine. They were nothing to sneeze home about, but it wasn't until they got Brady, and even then Brady sat for a little while until he got the right opportunity. So
Drew Bledsoe got hurt, and then Brady got his chance and never let it go.
Never let it go. Well, so anything else in regards to Tennessee football before we move on to basketball and baseball?
I don't think I have too much more to say. The biggest thing is that while I do have my concerns, I do very much feel like Josh Heupel is the coach that we needed, like desperately needed, and he has the right mentality of where this team needs to go. So I do have a lot of faith that even if he's not the one to get us to the mountaintop and get us to the national championship that we want the football team to have, he's going to get us into a much better. He's already gotten us into a much better position than we were the past decade, and he's going to very much keep us in a better position than we have been in a long time. To where even if he's not able to do it, the next guy that we get in after him probably will be the guy.
Right.
But I very much have faith in Heupel. So
Nice. Okay. Well, that's good, and we'll just have to wait and see. I guess last question for football. Now that we're down to the final four, who do you have as your winner?
it depends if you're asking who I expect is going to win the title or who I want to win the title.
Well, let's go with both then, because I'm sure you're probably like fuck Ohio State at this point. But if let's go with who you want and then who you think is going to win.
Yeah. Well, before the playoff started, I thought if Tennessee's not going to win the national title, there's really only 4 teams that I don't want to win the title. And that's Ohio State, Penn State, Texas, and Georgia. 3 of those 4 made the semifinals.
Right.
So, I mean, Notre Dame, it's one of those things. I've had a bit of a soft spot for Notre Dame for the longest time. So I kind of hope they can finally get over the hump that they've been dealing with for past few decades when it comes to getting to the national title game and winning the national title. But while I hope they're the one that wins, if Ohio State doesn't win the title this year, I'm going to be shocked because, yes, they lost to Michigan in the season finale, but they have looked way too good since for them to possibly lose the national title at this point.
They do seem to have a lot of momentum right now. And as someone who doesn't really believe in momentum being a thing in college or in any sport, I should probably start evaluating that, because it's just a consistent thing where a team gets hot at the right time, and they're the ones that usually come out on top. So I think I'm with you in that respect. I think I'd like to see Notre Dame win because I've got a friend who's a big Notre Dame fan, and I've had to hear a lot about the struggles that the Irish have had over the years. They've gotten close. That year that they had the Manti Te'o situation, but then they got absolutely destroyed in the national championship game. That sucked, and then they were just kind of in the wilderness for a while. And there is something to be said about Notre Dame just trying to remain as independent as possible and just do their own thing. There is something slightly admirable about that, even though some Notre Dame fans are pretty insufferable. But it would be a little shocking if Ohio State didn't win. And if that happens, then I'm just going to have to hear from my Ohio State fans for a while. And I'm sorry, I just don't want to do that. I really don't. But if they do seem, I hate to use the word destiny because that sounds so stupid when it comes to something as arbitrary as sports. But they do kind of feel like a little bit of a team of destiny right now. So
they really do. And it's like talked about not really believing in momentum. I definitely feel like momentum's the thing, especially because of the fact that I'll talk about the Arizona State Texas game. Texas very much had the game. I almost felt like put away early, but then the momentum started swinging back to Arizona State, and Arizona State put themselves in a position, honestly, to win that game. And I think the main reason they ended up losing is because the fact that they decided to pick the wrong play after they had gone up by a touchdown in the first overtime. They picked the wrong play on that 4th down play. And instead of putting guys back, making sure you keep everyone in front of you, you don't let them get the first down, force the guy to throw short as opposed to what they actually did and sent the house to try to blitz and not give Ewers enough time to be able to throw the ball. Ultimately, I think is what cost them. I think they just made the wrong play at the wrong time, because that game ends in that first overtime. Well, they call the right play that first overtime for defense. That game ends entirely differently.
It does, but you're right, and that is kind of the shitty thing about overtime is that you get a certain amount of chances, and if you make one fatal mistake, that's usually going to be the thing that kind of does you in.
Yeah, and speaking of overtime, I understand why they went to the decision they made for overtime rules, but I also kind of really want to go back to the way overtime used to be, because now it's first overtime period. Each team gets a chance to score. And if you score a touchdown, you can kick an extra point. Now it's the second overtime period. You score a touchdown, you have to go for two.
Yeah.
Back when we had that 6 overtime Tennessee-Arkansas game, second overtime period, you could still kick the extra point. And then third overtime on, you start at 25, score a touchdown, kick an extra, you have to go for two. Now it's just after that second overtime period, you just go for two.
Right.
It's like, I understand why they made that decision, because the fact that playing 6-7 overtime periods where you're having to do plays starting at the 25 is going to wear and tear a guy down. So it's a big health and safety thing, but I really do also miss that longer overtime periods, because that led to some insane games. Like, I think it was Texas A&M, LSU having an insane overtime game like that.
Yeah. So suffice to say that there's a lot of optimism for Tennessee football. What do you expect for the rest of the season for Tennessee basketball? Both, whichever one you want to comment on, men's or women's, or both if you want.
Let's go ahead and talk about both, because why not? Because right now, like, the only loss technically Tennessee has on the men's side was an exhibition game against Indiana.
Yeah.
That's just a game that was right for charity, doesn't exactly count. It's a good thing to kind of just give it a little bit of a tune-up against a team that should be really good this year. I don't know for sure how Indiana's doing.
Right.
But I think both on the men's and women's side, while I do expect them both to probably have a loss at some point, I do very much think that both these teams are going to be in a good position when we get to March Madness and be able to have a deep push into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially because I remember watching the Tennessee-Illinois basketball game earlier this year. I thought for sure Tennessee was going to lose that game. We just had a bad game the whole time. But then we ended up managing to keep in the game. We didn't let them get too far ahead of us. And then I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I'm looking at the roster right now of Jordan Gainey. There's like 5 seconds left in regulation. It's tied 64-64. I'm like, all right, we're about to go to overtime here. They inbound it to Gainey. He goes the length of the floor, throws it up, and as the buzzer sounds, it goes in, and we win 66-64.
Right.
I still don't know how we managed to pull off that win. But
just we take the wins we get. Right.
Oh, absolutely. But I very much feel like, in a way, same thing between basketball and football. Because Rick Barnes was a hire from our prior athletic director, or at least one of our older prior athletic directors. And it's one of those things, in a way, he's almost like Heupel when he got hired. Because I don't remember who our basketball men's head coach was prior to Rick Barnes. We had hired him away, I think, from Southern Miss. And then, like, notice of allegations came in about something he was doing at Southern Miss.
Mm-hmm.
And Tennessee realized he may still be doing this stuff here at Tennessee. So they essentially immediately fired him for cause, wiped their hands of the situation. And by some sheer happenstance, that happened to be the exact same year Texas decided to fire Rick Barnes. So we ended up just giving him a chance. I like to jokingly say he never had to worry about changing his wardrobe, because both teams are orange, both are UT. But he's brought us up to a level that I think we've wanted the men's team to be for a long time. And I very much feel like, even though I don't think this team's going to go undefeated, because I hope we beat Auburn, but I very much expect Auburn's possibly going to be a loss for us. Florida might very well be a loss for us next week, our next game next week. But we're in a good position with this team to potentially make a good deep run in March Madness. I won't say get to the Final Four, but if we have a team that's going to make it to the Final Four, this is possibly the team. And same thing with women's basketball, because we're currently the only college on the FBS on the Division I level, at least as far as I'm aware of, possibly in all of college athletics, that has both the men's and the women's team undefeated, at least as we're recording this, in basketball. And the fact that, what's her name? I have to go to the women's roster real quick so I can double check the women's coach's name. Kim Caldwell. So far, she's turned out to be nothing short of a fantastic hire. I mean, especially because of the fact that we've not only had plenty of games where we just completely, like I said, we're still undefeated. We're 13 on women's basketball, but we've had 6 games where we scored over 100 points on the women's side of things. I feel like Pat Summitt would be proud of where this team is right now.
And that's probably the greatest compliment that you can give the Lady Bulls, right?
Oh, yeah. I would definitely say so because, I mean, obviously some of the teams we've hung 100 points on aren't necessarily the best. But even then, it's been a long time since the Wet Lady Balls, even against some of the lower tier teams, we've hung 100 points on multiple times. So we've got funny enough, we have Oklahoma coming up here pretty soon, who on the men's side is undefeated. That, I think, for the women's team is going to be one of the biggest tests of the year. And that's actually tomorrow as we record this. So if we end up beating Oklahoma, then I really do feel like Tennessee has a really good chance to make a deep push on the women's tournament as well as the men's.
Nice. Okay.
So I definitely feel like both those teams have very much come a long way. Lady Vols getting back to where they need to be, and the men's team getting to where they want to be.
Yeah. Lot to look forward to with Tennessee basketball coming up this year. And then last thing, let's talk baseball for a little while because there's been recent success for Tennessee when it comes to baseball. So do you anticipate a repeat, or do you think because of the nature of the college baseball World Series that it could be a little bit harder potentially for a repeat?
I think it's just in the nature of baseball in general, not necessarily the College World Series. I think it will be difficult to repeat. I don't think it will be impossible, but I feel like it is going to be difficult. But the fact that there's plenty of times where it looked like Tennessee was going to be down and out this past year. Heck, one of my favorite headlines for this past season in hindsight was some publication asking if Tennessee was going to have a down year after Tennessee lost to an opponent early. And here we go, get the number 1 seed in the tournament and end up winning the College World Series, which like I said already, I ended up going to that and watching games 1 through 3. It was honestly one of the best experiences I think I've ever had in my life, just because how many people get to say they got to watch their team win their first ever national title in a sport?
Right.
And it's just an amazing experience to actually be able to go to that. And Tony Vitello, a lot of people don't really seem to like him, but I think it's just because he very much goes against the grain that is everything college baseball for a lot of guys. Like we have, like the Vols baseball team has the daddy hat. They have the fur coat that if a guy hits a home run, he puts on as soon as he gets to the dugout. How many other teams do that?
Yeah, that's a fair question.
So there's a level of fun. And I think it's just Tony Vitello very much just one of those guys that looks at his players and is like almost wants them to just have fun and just be unique and be who they are when they're playing the game. And I don't want there to ever be a fight in a baseball game where punches are thrown. I feel like Vitello might actually join the team in the fight if a fight ever did break out. He very much seems like that kind of guy who he'll let his players do what they think is best, have fun doing it. But if at the same time they ever are in a situation where they're up against the wall, for lack of a better phrase, no pun intended, he'll go up to bat for any one of those players on his team.
Nice.
Yeah, no, he is very much one of those kind of foundational pieces to make a baseball program actually turn into something far greater than it ever was before. Because I ended up looking at it, the last time Tennessee actually made the NCAA tournament was 1951. Well, I shouldn't say the tournament. Last time they ever made the College World Series final was 1951.
Jesus.
And then they made it again in 2024. Let's say my dad and my brother actually went with me. My dad was not even a year old the last time Tennessee made the final of the College World Series. And the fact that they actually managed to win this one, like I said, it just feels like it's one of those things where the story is only beginning for Tennessee baseball. Yes, we have those great players from the past who've gone on to have those wonderful, phenomenal major league careers. But it's one of those things where it feels like in the past, it's just been one of those they crop up every once in a while, as opposed to now where it feels like we're starting to build this program into something where hearing that like this player went to the University of Tennessee is going to be a lot more common of an occurrence on the baseball side of things. And I think it's very much because the fact that they hired a guy in Tony Vitello who knew he wanted to build a program and ended up finding the perfect place to do it in Tennessee.
So suffice to say that it is a good time to be a Tennessee fan because all things seem to be at least pointing in a positive direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, understand full well that there's a lot of just random things that just can't account for. So it is what it is. But
Mm-hmm.
it seems like you're in a good place and I'm ecstatic for you. Do you have any other sports hot takes that you wanna chat about before we wrap up?
I don't think I have too many sports hot takes. I do kind of hope some of the other teams, like on the both men's and women's side of things, like continue also see their upward trajectory. Because I think the women's rowing team, which funny enough, we mentioned the Big 12 earlier, the both Tennessee and Alabama's rowing teams compete in the Big 12 because the SEC doesn't sponsor rowing. And I think
Interesting. Okay.
the women's rowing team this past year got their highest finish ever.
Hey, look at that.
And then like our softball team, I think if they didn't win the SEC this past year, they got close, and they also made a pretty deep run in the SEC tournament. But I'm hoping that some of these other teams that we have, like the tennis team, golf team, the volleyball team, for that matter, and the women's soccer team, start also having that upward trajectory of success. Because I think the old saying always goes that success breeds success,
Yeah.
and hopefully by having all of these teams getting better, getting the right people in there that not just on the player side that want to be here, but also on the coaches side that want to be here and try to build something and have that right mindset of we're going to have to put our nose to the grindstone and fight tooth and nail for just about every single inch that we can get, then it's going to be a very great and beneficial thing to see going forward. And if people are upset with how Tennessee baseball acts, then they can talk to Tony Vitello about that one.
And risk potentially getting clocked for that.
I don't think he would actually throw a punch, but he very much strikes me as that kind of person where he's not going to send his team into the trenches unless he is leading the way.
Nice. Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on to talk about Tennessee. Exciting times for sure. Fingers crossed for them for both the men's and women's teams for long tournament runs. So we'll see how that plays out. Do you have anything that you want to plug, or do you have anything, or if people want to continue the conversation when it comes to Tennessee sports, where can the people find you?
I mean, they can always find me on I still call it Twitter. I don't really feel like calling it X.
It's never going to be X.
It's never going to
always
be
going
X.
to be Twitter.
It's always going to be Twitter. But I'm on Twitter. Joseph CSHN Davis is my Twitter handle. Sometimes I feel like deleting it, but other times I don't. But
Yeah.
I'm on there. And if you ever follow Sif Pop, anything about Sif Pop, you'll see me pop up every once in a while in some kind of a thing. Because I usually do the out of market series on Sif Pop, where I talk about movies that are from outside the US market. And yeah, those are the two main places you'll probably end up being able to find me. Otherwise, you can always try to find me if I ever get a chance to go to a Tennessee game. I have the day off actually for Tennessee's home opener for, well, not just home opener, for season opener for baseball. So might have to go to that. So you might be able to find me in Knoxville. If you're looking for me, I'll be in Orange. So along with possibly up to 100,000 of my closest friends.
Nice. Very,
But
very good. Again, just a great time to be a Tennessee fan. So,
oh yeah,
so exciting stuff there. Again, appreciate you having taken the time. We had to reschedule this a couple times because my kids were not cooperating. So I appreciate
they're being
you.
kids.
Yes, that is true. I need to be more empathetic about that, but they're mine, so whatever. But yes, I appreciate that, and hopefully we'll have you come back on to talk about more success with Tennessee down the road.
Yeah, it'll either be more success or what went wrong.
That's fine.
There won't be much of an in between, I don't think.
If you're willing to have the conversation either way, I'd love to have you back on.
That would be fine. Even if it also ends up being a debate between me and an Alabama fan on exactly who Dixieland Delight is about.
Okay, well, I will, maybe we'll have to set that up. So
Yeah.
we'll go from there. But
All right.
that's good. That's going to do it for this episode of Sportsball. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe to anything SPDM Crew, wherever you get your podcast. Join us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, Threads, YouTube, and Blue Sky at SPDM Crew. Check out our website at spdmcrew.com. Shout out to HiFlyer Creative Studios for making our awesome logo. Greatly appreciate their support. And if you have any marketing, logo, or brand standard needs, contact them at HiFlyerCreative.com. If you've got a podcast idea or you're interested in being part of the SPDM Crew as a guest or collaborating, email us at spdmcrew@gmail.com. Until next time, pain heals, chicks dig scars, glory lasts forever.
Go Vols.
Go Vols.